All right, let's talk about one of the biggest, most high-stakes problems in all of tech. How do you build something that can handle a million people showing up all at once without the whole thing just completely falling apart? It's a massive challenge, and today we're going to break down exactly how the pros solve it.
And look, this isn't some theoretical exercise. This is a real-world, absolute nightmare scenario. Picture it. You've poured your heart and soul into a new product, launch day arrives, the hype is real, and then, boom, the site's down. In just 2 hours, $500,000 in sales, gone, and your brand, it's getting torn to shreds online. That is the real cost of not being ready to scale.
So, what's the difference between that total disaster and a huge success story? Well, it really just comes down to one thing: preparation. On one side, you've got hours of downtime, angry customers, and a PR crisis. But on the other, with a properly scaled system, you get zero downtime, happy users, and all that buzz on social media is positive. The tech underneath is what makes all the difference. To really get how we go from disaster to success, we just need one core idea. And it's an idea that honestly we all already understand. Managing traffic on a highway. Seriously, this one analogy is going to make everything else click into place. Think about it. A single server is just like a single-lane highway. It's fine when there are only a few cars, right? But what happens at rush hour, or when your product suddenly goes viral? You get instant, total gridlock. Nothing moves. So what's the solution? You don't just try to make that one lane wider. No, you add more lanes. That's the whole secret. So let's put a name to that first idea, the one about making a single lane wider. In the tech world, we call that vertical scaling. It's the most straightforward path. You just take your one server and you beef it up. More CPU, more RAM, make it a monster. But the problem is, you eventually hit a hard limit. You can only make one machine so powerful before it gets insanely expensive or just physically impossible. And that brings us to the much more powerful approach: horizontal scaling. This is our add more lane strategy. Instead of one gigantic, super expensive server, you have a whole fleet of cheaper servers all working together. And this is how you handle basically unlimited traffic, because there's really no limit to how many lanes you can add to your highway. Okay, but if you have, say, a dozen lanes, how does each car know which one to get into so things don't get jammed up? Well, that's where the load balancer comes in. It's like a traffic director standing at the entrance to the highway, pointing each new car or each new user to the open lane with the least traffic. It keeps everything flowing smoothly. All right, we've got our big idea, our highway analogy. Now it's time to open up the toolkit and look at the actual strategies engineers use to build these massive multi-lane systems and manage that flood of traffic. So it really comes down to choosing the right tool for the job. As you can see, vertical scaling, making one server bigger, is simpler, no doubt. But it has those hard limits and gets pricey. Horizontal scaling, adding more servers, is a little more complex to set up, but it's way more resilient and, for all practical purposes, has no limits. If you're planning for 1 million users, horizontal is the only real choice. But what's the magic trick that makes horizontal scaling actually possible? The secret sauce is something called a stateless architecture. All this means is that no single server holds onto your specific info, like what's in your shopping cart. All that important stuff is stored in a central shared place. And because of that, the load balancer can send you to any available server at any time, and you'd never even know the difference.
And here's where things get really cool. This isn't manual. You don't have an engineer sitting there waiting to spin up new servers. It happens all on its own. That's auto scaling. The system sees traffic starting to build up, and it automatically builds new highway lanes on the fly. Then, when things quiet down, it closes those extra lanes so you're not paying for them. It's brilliant.
Now, having enough lanes is critical, but it's only half the battle. Each one of those lanes also has to be lightning fast. Because, let's be honest, a slow lane is almost as frustrating as a lane that's completely shut down. So let's look at how we make everything faster. And here's exactly why it matters so much. A single second of delay, just 1 second, can cause a 7% drop in sales. For a big online store, we're talking about millions of dollars. Speed isn't just a nice to have. It's absolutely fundamental to the business. Every single millisecond counts.
So what's the number one tool for making things faster? It's called caching. The best way to think about it is like a short-term memory for your application. Instead of making the long, slow trip all the way to the database to get an answer every single time, it keeps the most common answers in a super fast spot right nearby.
But modern systems are even smarter than that. They use multiple layers of this short-term memory. So when a request comes in, first it checks the absolute fastest cache possible, right inside the server's own memory. Not there? Okay, check the next layer, a slightly slower but shared cache. And only if it's not in any of those places does it make that slow trip to the database. This strategy is so effective, it can handle over 95% of requests without ever bothering the database at all.
Okay, we've seen the right way to build a scalable system. But sometimes the most powerful lessons come from looking at what can go wrong. So let's flip it around and talk about 3 common, absolutely catastrophic mistakes that will bring even the best system to its knees.
The first mistake is devastating, and it's so simple: not using database indexes. Imagine trying to find a specific word in a dictionary that had no alphabetical order. You'd have to read every single page from start to finish. That's exactly what your database has to do without an index. Scan millions and millions of rows, just wasting time and energy.
And the difference in performance it's just staggering. Look at this. Without an index, finding one piece of data in 10 million rows could take 10 whole seconds. That's an eternity. But with an index, the database just jumps straight to the right spot. 1 millisecond. It's not just an improvement, it's a completely different world.
Let me just put a number on that for you. A single, simple index can make that database query 10,000 times faster. This is, hands down, often the single biggest performance boost an engineer can make. Mistake number 2 is one we just talked about: failing to use a cache. It's like having a math genius on your team and asking them what's 2 plus 2 1,000 times every second. They could be solving complex problems, but instead, they're just getting overwhelmed with the same easy question over and over. That's what you're doing to your database without a cache. And the numbers make it crystal clear. Without a cache, if you get 1,000 requests per second, your database gets hit 1,000 times per second. But with a good cache in place, maybe only 50 of those requests actually need to go all the way to the database. The cache acts like a giant shield, absorbing 95% of the load. And finally, our third mistake is a sneaky performance killer: not using a connection pool. See, every time your app needs to talk to the database, it has to establish a connection. Think of it like making a phone call. You have to dial the number, wait for it to ring, wait for someone to pick up. It's slow. Doing that for every single request adds about 100 milliseconds of pure waste each time. A connection pool just keeps a few lines open and ready to go instantly.
So, to wrap it all up, how do you avoid that launch day nightmare? It all comes down to this checklist. This is your key to survival. Master your database with indexes and connection pooling. Protect it with multiple layers of caching. And from the very first day, design your system to scale horizontally, to add more lanes. Get this stuff right and you'll be ready for pretty much anything.
And that really brings us to the final thought. When you use the biggest sites in the world, they just feel effortless, instantaneous. But now you know the truth, don't you? It's anything but simple. It's this massive, invisible, perfectly coordinated ballet of highways and traffic directors and caching layers, all working together. So the next time you click a button and get a result instantly, just think about it. What incredible invisible engineering feats are happening in the background, just for you?